So thank you people for joining us. I'm Soumya. I'm a GenWise mentor, and I will briefly introduce the panelists and then just step back and then they can take it from there. So our panelists are Sandhya Kaushika, Radha Gopalan, Palomi, and Charu Hari. Sandhya has been with us before, even on this forum of these GenWise Addas. She's an accomplished neuroscientist at TIFR Mumbai. Earlier, she was at NCBS Bangalore. Um, Radha is an environmental scientist by training. For many years now, she's been an educator and an activist. She's a visiting faculty at APU and a senior GenWise mentor, and loves engaging with students, among other things. Palomi recently graduated from King's College London. Before that, she was at Ashoka University. And just before that, she has interned for a few weeks during her 11th, 12th standard summer. And so we would like her to sort of talk about that. Charu also has been here before on an GenWise Adda. She's our youngest panelist today. She's a academically strong 11th standard student from PSBB in Chennai, and she's attended several of our GenWise courses as well, both when they were happening on site and some this year online as well. And so the motivation for this session came from Sandhya's concern, particularly about questions that parents and students have about internships and what they mean and how they can be made useful and how it works. So that's where we sort of got started on this. So I will transfer this over to Radha now, who can take it and run with it. Over to you, Radha.
Thanks, Soumya. And welcome, everyone. Lovely that you could make it this Saturday afternoon. So today what we are sort of going to discuss or sort of have a conversation around is really this whole idea of internships. What does it really mean? How do we understand it? And we're trying to get the perspective of both students, somebody who's done an internship and then moved on to do a post-graduation after that, and somebody who's at the cusp, maybe interested in doing an internship. That's Charu. And of course, we have Sandhya, who's been on the other side, right? Who's actually, and in fact, Palomi has interned with Sandhya, and Sandhya sort of has a laboratory where students seek internship. So we're going to get the perspective of both of these groups. So now let me start with Palomi, actually. Palomi and Charu, both of you, it would be quite interesting to hear from you. What do you understand by this thing called internship, right? And why do you seek an internship? And Palomi, maybe we'll start with you since you've been through the process. And then Charu, after that, maybe you can share with us, what do you understand by internship? Why did you want to do this internship? And maybe also from the experience of some of your friends, what people are looking for. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here. And like Dr. Gopalan said, I had interned with Dr. Kaushika's lab after my 11th grade. So I was there for about 2 weeks, so it was quite short. And I think one of the main reasons that I wanted to do it at that time was because I was very interested in the sciences, and I was studying science in school at that time. And I wanted to get a sense of what science is like in the practical workspace. So, we were studying certain concepts in school through our textbooks, but I really wanted to understand, okay, what does research in a lab really look and feel like? So I was connected to Dr. Kaushika through one of my teachers in school, and they were kind enough to sort of take me on after that. And I think I got it really, for me, it was a really good understanding. It fulfilled my wishes of trying to understand what the workspace is like. Obviously, I was quite inexperienced at the time because I was only in the 11th grade, so I didn't really understand many of the things. So the lab were kind enough to sort of give me exposure and some level of training so that I could get to that level where I could do something. So we were working with the C. elegans worms, which is what Dr. Koshka's lab works on. And I did a small little experiment where I measured their responses to chemical and mechanical stimuli. And it was really nice to have that, practical experiment aspect to be able to see the things about neurobiology that I was studying in school under a microscope and with the worms. So that's mainly why I wanted to do it. And I think from what I understand of my friends and my peers as well, it's really an understanding of the professional sector. So I think, even in terms of being useful for applications in the future, I think everybody seems to be a bit more concerned about work rather than actually learning a lot out of the internship. Of course, you do learn a lot as well. But from my understanding, yes, it is definitely a professional thing. So yeah, that was my bit.
And maybe we'll come back to you after that, Palomi, to find out how that influenced what you did subsequently, okay? But let's get Charu's take on this. So Charu, what is your take on this whole internship thing?
Okay, so when I think of internships, I think of getting two things out of the internship. One being experience, not because even as an internship need not be just an academic experience or something that teaches you what the working world is like, what it would be like to work in a certain field. It's just an experience to grow. And but at the same time, it would be a lie if I said that uh, things like building up your resume weren't a part of internships, because a lot of my peers, from what I've seen, do think of internships as something they can boast about to make them seem more appealing to colleges or things like that. Yeah.
And also, is this, what you were saying about the resumes looking good? Is this mostly people who are applying in India, outside? I mean, is there any kind of a bias there?
It's more oriented towards outside India because within India, college applications are more about marks than extracurricular activities.
Okay, okay. So, Palomi, I wanted to just ask you this other question, and then we can get Sandhya's, point of view about this whole issue of idea of internships. So, how did this internship influence anything that you did subsequently, after your school and all that?
Yeah, no, it actually influenced my path a lot because in high school I began by studying science, mainly science subjects. And I really thought that life sciences is what I wanted to do in the future for my undergrad. And so it was really good for me to get that experience between my 11th and 12th, right when application season was coming on, because I discovered that a really important thing that I was enjoying at Dr. Kaushika's lab was also writing science. And sort of the element of what repercussions science would have on society, which made me kind of reconsider my bent towards science as opposed to the humanities. And so I realized that I needed a program for my undergrad that would enable me to have a sort of broad-based undergraduate education and be able to do a number of different subjects at once, at least in the beginning. So that's when I decided that I wanted to apply for liberal arts. And then I applied to Ashoka University, which is in Delhi, and it is like I said, liberal arts. So you do a number of foundation courses across disciplines, and then after your first year, you can begin to specialize. So then, after that experience of doing science, doing economics, doing history, literature, etc., I realized that what I really wanted to do and what my passion was history. And then I majored in that, and then I went on to do my postgrad in that as well. So it was a really clarifying experience actually for me.
Okay, so you sort of got a sense of what you probably didn't want to do, or it sort of shaped, and then what you really felt strongly about, in a sense, also.
Yeah, and in what ways I was interested in science? Was it actually the science itself or the global perspective on science?
Correct.
Yeah, if I can add something briefly here, Radha, I was just thinking, Palomi, when, like Radha said, you got a clear sense of what you didn't want to do. And I think that's very important, especially, I think, for the students who are, sort of recognized and who have the paperwork to show that they are on top of things, because they get good at anything they do. And so it's easy to mistake the marks for your own sort of interest in the subject.
That's
So it's good to know that I can do well in this, but that's not where I would like to dwell. So
correct.
that's nice too.
Very
Yeah,
interesting
just
point.
a thought. Yeah.
Yeah. And Charu, are you interested in doing an internship?
At the moment, I'm not really sure. The problem right now is with the pandemic and everything. I don't think an online internship would be the same
Right.
as something
Right.
in person, and I still don't know what field I'm looking into.
Okay.
So it's still is a lot of stuff is still up in there.
Okay. 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 Great. So Sandhya, it would be now great to hear your point of view on this whole internship thing. I'm really excited to hear the other side, because having been the teacher who's sort of, listen to students wanting to do internships and why they want to do, etc., it would be lovely to hear your perspective on and your
Yes.
experience. Yeah.
So I quickly put together a few slides just so I don't forget my points,
Great.
and
Great.
I hope that it's sort of useful. And um, I think you heard from uh, both Charu and Palomi. What is it that they thought they could get, or what they thought and what they eventually got from the internship? Um, in the time that I've run a lab, 5 high school students have interned with me. So it's not a great deal. It's not as if I take one every summer or so so in about 13 years of running my lab, I have 5 high school internships. So you can see that the number is low, but usually most labs don't take any. One of the things that it exposes students to frontier areas, right? I mean, it's obviously a huge step up from what is present in a textbook. Sometimes they get to see the practical applications of the textbook. So for instance, although Palomi did not do that, but a high school student who's currently in a very prestigious research oriented undergrad at HKU, ran DNA gels and tried to did what would be called recombinant DNA technology. So that sort of brings alive what you read in a textbook.
Right.
I think it also gives you a sense of what it means to be, or what it is to be in a training come working environment. So it's not like working in a bank where you show up at a certain time and you leave at a certain time. There is flexibility, but there's also seriousness. And of course, as already been mentioned, it can help with international admissions. And I think it's very important. What Palomi went through this process is actually, I think, one of the most important things students can gain from doing a high school internship. It can help you narrow your choices. In fact, one of the things I often see with master's students who come to PhDs, they also don't have extensive research experience. Just the journey of doing a PhD and being, committing so much time on a daily basis in trying to build up some kind of understanding of a very, very tiny little corner somewhere, which may not even have a lot of impact either on the field or definitely not on other people. It can be sort of difficult, right? So I've had high school internships. I think the one whom I had the longest ago is now finishing her PhD in UCSF. Um, and so I think that there is tremendous value here in sort of recognizing what it might be like. It won't give you the full flavor, but it can help you with this assessment if you use it well.
That's right. That's right.
So, what are the issues, some considerations I would like to bring forward as a person who might be considering a high school internship? See, often what happens when you especially reach out to a research lab, the student doesn't have enough background. They won't understand what they're doing, and it requires a tremendous investment from the lab to get them to the point where they have at least some semblance of an understanding of what they're doing. Because the high school is very different from a research lab, which is in India largely driven by PhD students, but it also has postdoctoral fellows, right? So there is this big gap. Learning actually practically to do things in the lab takes time. It's not something that you learn today and tomorrow you can do it. Okay, it's not like cutting vegetables or doing jhadu or something which is, even learning to ride the bicycle, which can be mastered in within, 2, 3 days. So you have to pick something simple.
Hmm.
And not all labs will have those sorts of projects at all times.
Right.
The third thing is you come to an adult environment. Everybody over there is going to be in their 20 and above if you're going to a research institution, right? Because
Yeah.
they're going to be either BSc students or doing a PhD, MSc students or PhD.
Right.
And high school students are 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and they are young. And so it's a very adult environment with different considerations, different ways of maybe interacting, and that can sometimes turn out to be isolating.
That's right.
The couple of a few other things that you should think about. One is that the lab head may
Hmm.
not always have time to spend with a high school student.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, the one who is finishing up a PhD, I was so busy and traveling so much. I think I spoke to her on an average maybe once in 2 weeks or
Right.
something like that. Palomi, and she spent like I think 2 months with us. Palomi spent far shorter time, but I did spend time with her. And what is critical for any of these internships to succeed, in my view, is there has to be someone in the lab who's willing to be a mentor and is interested in it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, in one case, in a couple of the mentors' case, there was a graduate student in the lab who was very interested in teaching. Palomi herself worked with another graduate student called Parul, who now runs this startup company called Transeb, working with students because that's what she likes to do.
Hmm.
And there was another postdoc who worked with two other high school students, and she was trying to decide whether she wanted to do science. She ended up finally being a science editor, whether she wanted to do editing, whether she wanted to take up college-based research teaching, and she was offered a position in St. Xavier's in Ahmedabad, or she wanted to go the school route. All of them, so she used it as a means to figure out if that's what she might like to do by mentoring both high school students and undergrads. So
Interesting.
such a person needs to be there who's willing to
Right.
take that out.
Right.
Otherwise, PhD students are interested in getting their PhD. Postdocs are interested in making sure their papers come out and they're taking their next step in their career. And unless this is a career choice that they themselves want to sort of explore and are thinking about how it might feel like to do this or have strong interests in science outreach, you may be unwilling to spend the time to do this.
That's right. That's right.
So these are the considerations that you need.
Hmm.
Many students will write to me, I think when they do high school internships, an interview that I gave a long time ago in Parent Edge, I think comes up.
Right.
And people will write to me from many other cities asking whether they can do an internship with me or can I suggest someone else.
Right.
Um, for all high school students, I would suggest that local internships often work better. There are logistical issues that you need to think about.
Hmm.
How will you get there? Where will you stay? How are you going to manage your food? These are issues even when master students and undergrad students apply for internships. But when you're that young, to be able to do that in a safe manner, in a manner in which in a completely new place, I think it bears thinking about. I think one should not rush into it. Something local is always good.
Absolutely.
The last thing which I think one needs to really carefully think about is often what happens even in high school 11th and 12th, people have a lot of work which comes from their schools, from their tuition classes, from preparing for whatever competitive exams that you're
Right.
going to take. One thing, if you want to get something out of the internship, it is useful to think about how many hours of the day you have to spend on
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
How consistently can you spend it?
Mm-hmm.
Almost every person who's done an internship from my lab, I ask them either to write a little small
Right.
summary of what they do or do a presentation.
Right.
Ideally both, but I've never managed to get one person to do both.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, because that sort of consolidates what they have learned.
Right.
So, that requires an investment of time,
Right.
which may not always be compatible with the other things they have going on. And so, what you really want, if you want to gain something from the internship beyond that, I have a line that shows up on my resume and I can maybe approach one of them to give me a letter, is that you think about how to invest yourself and your time to get what you want. The
Right.
other thing which I think somebody else mentioned when we were discussing this before the
Yeah,
session started is often students want to try multiple types of internships.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
you have to know why you're doing that internship. What do you hope to gain from it? Okay. You're not going to necessarily be rule out whether you are going to decide between, say, um, programming and something else. I mean,
Right.
most undergrad degrees will give you a broad based in lots of things. So unless you're saying that, I want to make sure that I'm going to drop this forever and I don't like it enough, that's, I would suggest that there is value if you're doing an internship to invest sufficient time to gain the most that you can out of it.
That's right.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a problem which PhD students face when they do rotations. They will try out 3 different labs or 4 different labs, and they'll have to join one lab for doing a PhD. And it's something which tears students apart. Which lab should I join? Which is more exciting? Am I shutting out my possibilities? It
Right.
isn't like that, and it is definitely not like that for a high school student. Pick a good environment, an environment which is giving you an opportunity to learn, which is also something in which you feel part of and
Yeah.
you feel comfortable in, and invest your time in it. I think that's what is likely to give you the best outcomes.
Yeah, right.
Okay. How do you find high
At
school
this
internship?
point, Sandhya, at this point, I just wanted to bring Charu in with just one question, because you talked about these different, you were talking about sort of trying different things. Charu, I had a question for you related to what Sandhya just said. There are different things that I know you are interested in multiple things as a 11th standard student, and even otherwise, having known you for a bit now. So rather than sort of seeing this as an internship in the laboratory at the end of 11, do you have other thoughts on doing multiple things which interest you, because you have multiple interests? Do you think that is something that you would think about when you think about an internship?
I think I look at an internship as more information I can add into making my decision.
Okay.
I find myself in the same position where I don't know whether I want to do science or humanities, and I really don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know how to make that decision, and I don't want to make a decision I'll regret. And
Right.
so at the end of the day, I feel like the best way you can make a decision is with the most information possible.
Okay.
And I think an internship is another bit of information that you can add.
Okay. So would you sort of, because we've been sort of talking about a science lab here as the research institution. So have you or any of your friends, sort of looked at this as doing an internship, or even getting some experience rather than using internship, getting some experience in other ways?
So far, I only know one person my
Okay.
age who has had an internship, and he shadowed a doctor at an eye hospital, and he was already set, like he knew he wanted to become a doctor.
Okay.
So for him, it was more of resume building than experience, because like his decision was made.
Right.
So I don't think I haven't spoken to my friends a lot about internships, because at the end of the day, the focus is more on getting good grades
Right.
than
Right.
getting more experiences.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I
So
think you make a good point about more information helps you to, I mean, it's an interesting point to talk about. More information helps you make decisions. So, sorry, I interrupted. You were saying something. Yes.
yeah, what I was going to say was that so far I feel like internships are, at least from my experience, internships are more resume building than experience at this age. I
Okay.
think because I know older people who've done internships in college and stuff, and for them it's about experience. But for people in my age group, I don't really know.
So, Palomi is probably an exception in that situation. Yeah. Sorry, Sandhya, let's come back to, there was this very interesting points that you had made earlier in our earlier conversations about what are other ways to see this experience gaining process? You know, I think that would be very interesting for everybody to sort of get a sense of. Yes, yeah. You're on mute, I think, Sandhya.
That's what I was going to end my
Okay, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
here it is.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that Charu mentioned is that, you don't want to make a mistake. It's very hard, especially if you choose the broadest possible curriculum later on that you often fairly early on, some of the things you don't like. It's just a matter of then sculpting that into something which you actually will like, is my view. I could be wrong about this.
Right.
But there are, I think, very good alternatives for improving and building on science related things which do not necessarily need um, exposure to a research lab.
Yeah.
And in fact, that is a fairly new thing. I think, in the 90s and even most of the 2000s, there were very few high school students who were ever seeking out this kind of
Right.
input or
Right.
this kind of path.
Right.
So one of the things which, I always think is very good is you should never turn your back on home experiments and observations. It could
Okay.
be ants in your house, it could be the behavior of cockroaches, it could be some little chemistry experiment, it could be crystallization, it could be
Yeah.
making soap at home.
Yeah.
Any number of things that if you just do at home, have the potential, because it's something that you have initiated and you enjoy. There is an element of fun in it which a more structured program can sometimes rob you of it just because it's structured,
Right.
right? And you do it at your pace. It's like today you don't have the energy to do it, you don't have to do it. If you're working in some lab somewhere and you said, no, I'm going to show up and do this today, then you have to show up and do it today, or let them know you're not coming. And if they're depending on you, then it becomes much more pressure. So I think don't knock it. There are many things, anything which captures your interest,
Mm-hmm.
you can go and explore.
Mm-hmm.
And all you often need are a few bartans, gas, oven, which many people have at home. And maybe you can get a few chemicals from some shelf, from just your cleaning shelf. So that's something which you should not turn your back on. It gives you immense amounts of pleasure. Sometimes you will find school teachers who would love to do things outside the curriculum, and if a bunch of students got together, or even a couple of students got together and approached this individual, and you can often see them, they're like super enthusiastic about everything and more interested in that and finishing what is needed for the exam, right? You can spot that phenotype. And sometimes they have equal,
Correct.
they give equal weight to both.
Correct.
And those such teachers might be willing to work with you and guide you or suggest things to you, because they also have the advantage of knowing you well.
That's right.
um, I have made a spelling mistake here. You can arrange a neighborhood club, just as you have a bunch of people in an apartment complex who will come together and arrange a dance class or a yoga class or something like that. You can arrange a neighborhood club with other school students with similar interests.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, and that essentially then becomes a peer group.
Right.
And you can do things together. Anything from hacking to building a tiny robot to figuring out whether what happens in leaves which are red, is it going to be different, any number of things you can, because you will now have a peer group to discuss things with.
Right. And
Reach out,
behavior, maybe. You know. Right. Yeah. Yes.
reach out to local colleges. Sometimes there are opportunities there and teachers there with small projects. And don't forget, the point is really to have fun
Mm.
and not to join a rat race. So
Mm.
I need some corrections over here.
Mm.
And it should not, I mean, when I hear descriptions that, yeah, there is, it's mainly for resume building, or that's a very important component, I sort of actually feel sad for the young people. I mean, don't knock the thought that you have long periods of time free for yourself and can sort of explore things on your own. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah,
Some guidance occasionally, and if you do any of these things yourself or in your own initiative, you're of course going to be much more attractive
that's right.
for a person you're applying to for an internship. It goes so much beyond saying, I'm really interested, I'm very keen, I'm passionate. You've actually done something,
That's
right?
right. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that really helps. And I would urge people to sort of think about these alternates and try to develop these alternates. And often they are much better.
yeah, yeah.
So I think, for instance, in certain places in the world, like in the US, certain universities and private programs
Right,
arrange structured internships, and they are of course very good, and they are
that's right.
very useful. I'm not saying they are not. I mean, they are also very expensive.
Yes,
And
exactly, exactly, exactly.
yeah, they're also very expensive. And but again, I would say it is structured. It might, getting in is an interest, but doing these sorts of things, sort of, you hold yourself accountable. And
That's
I
right.
think it has the opportunity to bring out the best in you, the way maybe a more structured program will
You want.
give you more information,
That's
but
right.
may not necessarily keep the enthusiasm to the same degree unless you have really, really amazing instructors and
That's right. Yeah.
things of that nature.
In fact,
So,
when you were saying this, I was just thinking that, also important to start this early on, right? I mean, to have this culture of exploration, not just at the 11th standard or, at whatever point people want to intern, but to sort of have this thing of looking around you and finding ways to learn from that space around you much earlier on, so that it
yes,
becomes a part of
yes.
your.
For that, I mean, this is again just my personal opinion.
Correct.
I am not by any means, an educator for school children or other things, but I've often felt less is more in terms
Yes,
of curriculum.
yes.
And I really think that there is great value in having free periods of time
Mhm, mhm,
where you can go and
mhm,
explore
mhm.
what you want.
That's right.
And I think that really helps a lot in the long run, because uh, I think guidance is important, and that's why I think something like a neighborhood club where you get together with a group of people who may have somewhat similar interests,
Mhm.
and but it's not something which is driven by studying for exams, or maybe a peer group just in school where you will have lots of other things to discuss which are more social issues, but a group of people who are drawn together by similar interests and you can meet with them with some frequency, and any number of people will volunteer a little bit of
Correct. Yeah.
time to give a
Um,
little bit of structure to it. I think that
that's right.
could be beneficial. Of course, it has to be
Yeah.
done, and I think the idea is it's nice to have something structured because all of that thinking is done by someone else. But sometimes you can have better
That's right.
learning outcomes when you do things which are driven by yourself.
Right. So related to this, and I wanted to actually get
Should I
Charu.
go through how you might look for an internship in India?
Yeah, and before that, there's somebody. There's Vivek from from the Facebook thing, I think, who had a question that in the US and Europe, the concept of internship is quite mature. So companies and labs actively promote or support students. But in India, it's not very much encouraged by various organizations, labs, etc. So he wants to know whether his assumption is right. And if yes, how does one overcome this barrier? You've spoken you've spoken to this a little bit, but I think it might be interesting to get a little more, Sandhya, from you on this. And yeah, and then maybe after I'll also just ask Palomi if she's had any experience outside. Yeah, go ahead, Sandhya, please. Yeah.
So I agree with you that there are many more structured programs outside the country than in India. Um, and those are by and large paid for programs. You're talking about high school internships, right? And they're paid for
Mhm,
programs, but
mhm.
if you want to approach a research lab in the US, for instance, which I'm more familiar with, the path would be
Yeah.
no different than in India. Okay,
right.
you would just have to write to people and so on
That's,
and so forth.
that's
So
right.
these structured programs, as I said, there are many good things in it. I definitely think there is value in it. There's value also if you go to one of these international programs, you see students from other parts of the world.
Right.
All of that is a big plus. I'm not saying it's not, but they
Right.
are very expensive.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't get in.
That's right.
And as I think, especially if you're interested in a research career, I mean, this is something which uh, you need a lot of self motivation.
Mm, mm,
I think that is so central to
mm.
doing research. And I can only speak for internships in that place. And this is probably a trait which will serve you well in many, many avenues in life. And sometimes the challenges are quite a bit because, I think your experiments defeat you because they just don't work. Your ideas turn out to be wrong.
Right.
And there is inherently in research careers a lot of different failures,
That's
right?
right. That's
And if you do something self-driven, you're going to see these failures
right.
and slowly maybe build a little bit of resilience to say that, it's all right, I can try something else. And there is value in having those lessons. So outside of the structured programs, I don't think for high school students, there is a whole
Internships.
lot even in the US.
Yeah. Even in the US. That's right. That's right.
There's coding for Clossy, and there are these other universities which run things.
Right.
But I think if you want a research internship, the path would be not that different. The thing is, the science footprint in many countries is much bigger than in India.
India. That's right.
That means there are more people
Okay.
per high school. So our population structure is such that we have a lot of young people.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And we have the number of labs which can actually at any time, there are many issues at hand which can accept people is also small.
Small.
So
That's
both
right.
of them, when they collide, there are
Yeah. Issues
things
there.
that come up.
Yeah. Palumi, do you have any experience of, situations? For example, you were in the UK, right, when you were doing your masters. So did you come across any experiences with your peers or people whom you might know who went through internships at some point in their student lives? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I did actually. Most people at uni end up doing some sort of internship because by that point everyone's like, I need a job and this is really going to impact my job prospect. But I think from my experience of my peers, I think what happened with a lot of people is that when you're sort of one intern in quite a large organization, it's very difficult for you to actually get the kind of mentorship that you want and you're looking for at that stage. And you don't get to take a lot of, you don't have any sort of power in that organization. So there's not many things that you're actually able to do. So you might think, you might go to a big newspaper and you might think, okay, I'm going to get an experience of what it's like to be a journalist, but
ah,
you don't get to write any articles at all.
right.
And a lot of what you're doing is kind of research scut or smaller level things like that.
Mm,
So I think um, a lot of people were quite disheartened with their internship experiences. But that said, it did help sort of narrow what you don't want to do. What I found really useful in the UK was that I was volunteering,
Okay.
and I was volunteering throughout the year. So it wasn't like one 6 week quick internship, but I was doing a few hours every week throughout the year. So I got a more long term experience of the organization, what it's like, and there was quite a lot of different arenas in which, I could help, and it didn't require any high level of skill or
But
anything
it's
like
also
that. But
after your undergrad. Sorry to interrupt, but this is also after your undergrad, right? When you were doing your
yeah,
post graduation,
yeah,
not
yeah,
at
it was
the
during my
level of
master's.
school, because you have a different level of maturity, and also you've already had, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's an important one too. I think that's also sort of what Sandhya has been saying right from the beginning, that one has to look at these things as. But here I wanted to get a little bit of input from the two of you. Uh, when we were having this conversation about some of the ideas that Sandhya had talked about, where it's about really exploring and enjoying the process as opposed to being tied to an outcome of sorts. So, Charu, in that context, what has been your, how would you respond to, say, a group of you getting together? And also, have you been doing these kind of explorations from the time you all were younger, or is that not something that you all have done?
Okay, so as far as the group setting is concerned, don't have much experience with my friends, mainly because I think it's more of me being a very private person and not going out and interacting with my peers as much. But as far as exploration has been concerned, I've been lucky that my parents really encouraged it at a young age,
Okay.
and um, I remember like even I left cake out one day and fungus grew on it, and I was just really fascinated by the way it had grown and like all the structures. And my brother and I were just like really enthusiastically talking about it for like a whole hour. And my mom came and started contributing to that conversation. So as far as exploration is concerned, it's very I wouldn't say it's like very solid or very consistent, but yeah, I've done it on my own or with my younger brother.
And what do you think in terms of, getting your peers together, friends, family, and trying to, create environments where you can do this as opposed to constantly looking at something that is already been structured?
As far as that's concerned, the first thing that came to mind was a lot of my friends, at least now, they have like the certain career in mind
Oh,
and they're
okay.
working towards that. And I don't, or at least I kind of have like a story that I give everybody. So people, because if you say I don't know what I want to do, then people don't want to accept that answer. So so as far as like internships or even science, I feel like a lot of kids have this almost hatred towards science because
Hmm.
it's a subject that, at least as far as school has been concerned, is not very exploration oriented. It's more like you get this is the question that might come in the exam, and these are the 3 points you have to write to get full marks.
Okay.
And the exploration side, again, I feel like I have friends who do it independently,
Okay.
but and as far as I know, there isn't much of a group setting going on.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. So we've got some chatter going on in the chat box about open days in research institutions, and also Sandhya, you've been sort of responding about TIFR. But before that, I think Ruchi had a comment. She was saying in the US it's quite common to have summer jobs in high school and labs. So what she was actually trying to say, there's a process in place for hiring high school students over summer vacation. So I think this comes back to some of the things, Sandhya, you've been sort of emphasizing. I think that there is one element of this is a process structured thing that is being set up, and the other is to really be more open in your explorations and therefore learn in a very different way, as opposed to a more of a structured learning. So now, okay, I think the conversation is
Do you
really
want
about.
me to comment on? Do you want me to comment on that? On
Yeah,
what
go
you
ahead.
said
Yes, absolutely.
about,
Yes.
I personally think having a job in the summer is a really good
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
However, I will say that in India, at least for middle class kids, that is not the path that is chosen,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
I can say that even now in college,
Yeah.
at least in the US, you have something called the work study program where people go and for essentially minimum wage work in the diner or wash glassware
Yeah.
in the lab or things of that nature. But in India, those jobs are occupied by people who actually need the money to run their
True.
family.
Very true. Very true.
So there is that barrier,
Yes.
and and but I mean I think it's a great idea, but that avenue as it exists in other countries may not be fully applicable
Okay.
in our context.
That's right.
And also I should say, even when we get undergrad or master students and we tell them you come and you just pour plates for the first month, they're
Right.
not so excited by
No,
it
they're
because
not.
that is
Yeah.
not the kind of thing that they're looking for.
That's right.
Many people are looking for something, no, I have to do research in some shape or form.
That's right.
And I cannot comment on what the entire population of high school students will be like, because I, of course, have much more experience with undergrads and master students writing for internships, of which every year there will be
Right.
100 or more,
I can imagine.
as opposed to a high school student, which is more like 5 or 6. So I can't comment on that, but I think the desire is to have some sort of hands-on research experience. But I
Right.
agree with Ruthi that that
Yeah,
would be nice to have. I think it
that
has
would be nice.
real value of teaching young people lots of things, but that
Oh,
does not exist in our culture.
that's right. That's right. It's a socio-economic, cultural sort of an issue as well. But Sandhya, you had that slide on how to find internships, and Raja Krishnan, who's on Facebook Live, is interested to for you to elaborate on that. So maybe
So
you can put that
let me
slide back
share.
up.
I can, I
Yeah.
think this is a reasonable template to follow.
Yeah.
Um, how do you find? You write and ask people whose work interests you. And one way to find out what interests you is many institutes now. TFR Mumbai through the GenWise Forum has been doing this for a very long time, but other institutes are also beginning to do it. Do public talks where students, postdocs, faculty come and talk about their work or things that they do in the lab. They give talks out in the general public. There are 1 or 2 days where people come into the institute and look at experiments and see labs. And that's a huge thing which we do in TFR Mumbai, run again by Anna Bhattacharya, who runs GenWise as well, which is a major outreach in the Colaba campus, where he gets 9th and 10th kids in. And we have it done over 2 days. We have droves and droves of essentially 9th and 10th kids coming in. And of course we do 3 times a month chai and why, and they also go out into other places. But while Colaba campus has a well-developed program, there are other institutes in the city in the country who do that as well. And people do reach out. So for instance, IIT Bombay is doing some sort of coding thing with Mumbai
Yes.
students,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right? So there are these structured things as well. And but you get exposure to what people are working on and whether that might interest you. Some people would just look at a microscope and anything they see under it they love. Another person might say, oh, look at this is so cool, I'm seeing material behave in a certain way. So there are things which might interest them. They may see YouTube videos or something on Twitter and say that, oh, that's an environment I really want to be in. What works best is if the student writes themselves
Right.
to the person who they are interested in, rather than a parent, because that immediately tells the person who they are approaching that this is a student who's interested
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
It's enormously difficult to write a formal email, or semi-formal email, and make this request better than few words, abbreviated text that they will send to each other in their peer group, right? But it sort of shows some degree of seriousness. It helps a great deal if a teacher reaches out for their student, because
Okay.
then that that student has really sort of made an impression on the teacher, and the teacher will not approach for a given student unless there is, unless they really felt that
Oh,
here's a person who can take advantage of it. So
okay.
that's a tremendous thing. Palomi, for instance, came
Yeah.
to my lab through that means, where her teacher was someone who said, I think she has this interest. I think she'll be a good person if you have space and are willing to consider. And that made a huge difference.
Okay.
Each person who applies, you will need patience and persistence to identify a person willing to take you on. Be prepared for a lot of rejects. As I said, there are real difficulties. Labs will not necessarily have a project or a person who can act as within the team mentor, which is exceptionally important for an internship to succeed. In fact, that's exceptionally important for any internship to
Yes.
succeed. As Palomi talked about internships in college, you would
Right.
think going to gain something, but you become a faceless cog. And if you are a faceless cog, it can be pretty crushing for a young person. So
Yeah.
you will need patience and persistence. And please recognize needs outstrip positions even for science undergraduates. So there is a real issue there that it's going to be difficult to do, but do not, I mean, if that's what floats the kids' boat, let them write, let them go, let them do a little bit of some reading of their own, or maybe a little bit of work on their own. Say, look, I've done this, I really like it. And then someone is going to say, and oh, why not give this young person a chance?
Exactly.
Maybe
Exactly.
we will give maybe we will get somebody really good
Yeah.
long term who's interested in these questions, or long term who's interested in this area, and
Yeah.
that would be a fantastic opportunity
Yeah.
for them. And it'd be so wonderful to watch to make this small contribution to this young
That's right.
person's development, right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
don't give up. I think that's very important. But I don't want to make it seem as if it's a walk in the park, because it's not. You
No?
will need patience and persistence, but it can work out. I know somebody who is, I guess, a high school student, who over the last summer worked with some faculty member in a US university. And apparently, all of that even shaped up into what could eventually be a publication, which is
That's right.
really pretty
That's right.
amazing. You should
Remarkable.
know that that's a very atypical experience.
Yeah. Correct.
But on the other hand, it can happen. And so I think that's useful. Again, it depends on what questions that the person is addressing, what skills the student has, is it something they are capable of doing. So those are, just write to people, make sure you write a coherent email, let the student write. Have a little bit over there as to why that interests you and what you have done to develop that interest, maybe one or two sentences, no more, and hope for the best.
Sandhya, there's a very interesting long question from Adhavan, who's a student. And he was there, in fact, in our last Adda, where we talked to students about online. So it's a longish, but the nub of the whole thing, I think, is how do you know which internship to get into? Okay. And particularly if you're not sure, like Charu, he says, who is, you're not sure where you want to go. And I think there's a bit of a chicken egg situation here as well, where he says, do you sort of the work to get into a field of internship, or choose an internship sort of first and work towards getting to it? So I think, I think some of in fact, pretty much all the slides that you shared with us so far do address this question of, how do you prepare, what takes to get into an internship. But this thing about, and this also, I think, relates to Ruchi's
So
question.
what I would suggest, it's only a suggestion,
Right.
is don't pick something that you will dislike, right?
Good one.
And there are often many things you like with similar degree of interest,
Right. Right.
right? There will be things which you would really love, will be very few.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all right to pick in either category, because an internship at that age in any category, whether it's something that you love or something that you just like, has a learning potential.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there are certain characteristics of learning across all fields
That's right.
which are shared.
That's right.
And there are some practical aspects to internships which are also shared.
Right.
And
Right.
in that realm of things, ask the student, or the parent helps the child make a choice as to what they want to do,
That's
right?
right.
And
Yeah.
say, walk them through it and say, what about this? And it can be very, very different. It may be
Right.
that they may get a chance to work with a journalist editing copy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? and
Exactly.
and that's and their other choice might be, let me go to a chemistry lab and do something.
Correct.
And
Correct.
both are perfectly valid choices. Whichever works out first, you go for that and see what
Yeah.
happens, right?
And also,
So
like
I
you
think
say, yeah. Sorry. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
many, at least Lisa, I don't know, I can't speak to other fields as confidently as I can speak to about science. I remember, Paulomi may not remember, but I remember because high school students are rarer than rarer in a lab than, London students, is that you have to do over and over and over and over again to get any amount of data. And I remember at one point she was saying, oh, my hand and wrist hurt. Yeah, so there is that element of repetition is there, and I think people sort of understand and recognize it. Say if you have classical music, you have to do riyaz or practice, but
Right.
that element, that repetitive element, is there even when you're doing experiments. So I think my sense is there is value in whichever ones that you want to get into. You shouldn't shut the door. If your interests are in 10 things very different from each other, try to pick maybe 3 of them which are different from each other, and try to see where you can land an internship and go with that. I think all internships, if you do them, have value to add in helping the young individual develop themselves. And they're all very nice. I mean, doing a science internship is great, doing a theater internship is great, and some of these other programs are slightly better structured.
Correct. And also maybe it will allow you to open up various elements of yourself which you didn't even know that you had those abilities or interests, or just open you out as a person many times, right?
Yeah.
Palomi and Charu, any thoughts on that? Yes, Palomi's dying to say something.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was about to say, can I jump in?
Yeah.
What I wanted to say was, I think, in trying to decide what I want to do in my internship, it would have helped me if at that time I would have also kind of asked myself why I want to do this internship. And, if it's because you're kind of confused about what you want to do and you don't know what you want to do in your undergrad, there's lots of different ways that you can arrive at that answer that also don't involve an internship. So if I had been reading around more in different subjects, or if I had been speaking to people and just randomly asking them, okay, what does your profession involve on a day-to-day basis? Um, or finally, like what I did was to take liberal arts. So even for my first year, my first 2 years, I got to do every subject and see, okay, I don't like this, I don't like this, okay, now I like this. So I think, internship is one really great way, but if you're feeling pressured about it, then it's okay, even if you don't find your answers to your internship, there's lots of ways to do that. So I wouldn't worry. Is all I'm saying.
Okay. Oh, that's a great. Adhavan, I hope that helps you. And also, Charu, did you have anything you wanted to add to what Sandhya and Palomi just said?
I actually had a question that I just wanted to put out there, which is if a student takes an internship, ideally, what should be their goal in doing that internship?
That's a question you're asking. What should be their goal? Yeah. Are you asking that of Sandhya?
Everyone, I'm asking that of everyone.
You're just putting it out there.
I think I already said what the goal should be.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah. My goal is I think I would say enjoy the process and have fun. That is much more important than anything else.
That's right. And that would be my response.
And I think
yeah.
I generally I think one does not need to be, how does one say? I think all of them have value to add as an internship wherever you do, whatever you do, but none of them have value to add if they are not enjoyable to some degree. I think high school is too young an age to start thinking about, if I do this only, then I will get ahead.
Absolutely.
So that's, again, as I said, my personal view, because I think most people will get, with an undergrad degree, a reasonable job. But I think it's still not common for people to identify something that they do because there are large elements of things in it which they enjoy.
That's right.
And it's also true that young people take a long time to make up their mind, with few rare exceptions, and that's perfectly okay. That is what it is. So
exactly.
If you're not enjoying the process, or you think it becomes something which is pressured, it's much better to just hang out at home and read a book. Or, as Palomi says, is very, very important, is, if you find someone who you think is doing something cool, speak to them.
Talk to them. Exactly.
That's a great way to figure out if that's something that you might like. And in fact, don't forget to ask them, oh, this is all really cool, but is it really cool on an everyday basis, or
It
what are the
is. That's
daily
right.
struggles? Good for
That's
you
right.
to
Yeah.
know. I
Yeah.
mean, it looks great to listen
Yeah.
to an outreach talk in science. What sweat, blood, and tears went behind
Correct.
it is not, is hidden.
Yeah. So we have one, I think we're sort of shooting over our time, but we have one last question. I think that might be a good one to wrap up with. And that is,
Radha, can I interrupt here? Sorry.
yeah, sure.
And I was just thinking of Charu's question, and
Yeah.
I've heard this word on the internet somewhere, of being micro ambitious. Okay, and the idea is that it's like Sandhya said, it's a very rare person who knows, where they want to get to, and the path to get there right away, at 16, 17, 18, 20, even at 40. I think it's becoming rarer. But if you have that clarity, great, then go right for it and whatever. But if you don't, and if you're normal, like about 99% of the people out there, then whatever is here, whatever little thing is here with you now, go for it. Go for it. Engage with it completely. Engage with the work, engage with the people, engage with the questions, engage with the doubts, engage with it totally. Then when the next thing comes, engage with that totally, and engage totally with these things that are there. Apply all of it yourself, and you will find that you are, you're sort of getting clearer, and you're growing, and you know a little bit more about where you might want to be and where you would rather not be. So I think this micro ambition is one sort of keyword that I like. So I thought I'll just share
Yeah.
it with young Charu. Yeah, go ahead,
And
Charu.
also the other thing, more very, 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 the reality is that there is a lot of pressure out there. The reality is, as you know, this whole Viscit thing, as is just being posted. So the reality is, yes, there is a lot of pressure to be successful, to be clear, to be sure. But but and I can say this from, this is my personal point of view, is that too much is made of clarity, because also what happens in life is then you don't allow yourself the opportunity to experience a lot of things which not necessarily may bring you joy all the time, because there is, I don't think everything, something can bring you joy all the time, but the thing is, it opens you up and you begin to see the world differently. You begin to be more open to seeing, to also to experiencing different things, and that really sort of expands the facet of who you are as a, your multiple facets of who you are as a person. And then you make certain choices as you go along. So the thing is, with all this external pressure that is on, particularly more so, I think over the years we've all had pressures of various kinds, but I think today the pressures are very different. And how do you keep yourself resilient, and how do you keep yourself without sort of collapsing, as a result of these kinds of pressures? I think that is a big sort of a challenge, Charu, and that comes a lot from trying to build that resilience in various ways. And we did talk a little bit about this on another Adda, but I'm sure we are stepping into a topic that could be picked up for another conversation. But I would just like to sort of take Ruchi's question last, and I think it's really directed more at you, Sandhya, that what skills or qualities should high schoolers already have before entering a professional environment?
Oh my goodness.
Yes, oh my goodness, is what I said to myself.
You know, most young high school students have some of these skills already, and the skills are, you show up. When you say you'll show up, and you know I think, okay, let me tell something which will really help,
Yeah.
which is that when they don't know something or they can't understand something, it really helps if you come up to them, come up to whoever is your local mentor and say, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do here. Or I got it this far, but no further. Can you go over this with me again? I think this is a very important skill to have, because obviously a high school student in a research lab, the gap is large in terms of knowledge base. Beyond that, I wouldn't worry about it, because
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody who's in a research lab, who runs a research program, who is going to think that, you know, this is the laundry list of things which I expect a high school student to
Right.
know.
Right.
You expect them to be reasonable, responsible people,
Yeah.
which most kids are, and and it really helps if they can say, tell at least someone who's the immediate mentor, these are things I don't understand. And
Yeah.
the normal, everybody needs some amount of social skills,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
most high school kids have that. So it's
Great.
in fact the vast majority of them have it. So
Lovely.
nothing special.
Nothing special. But thank you. And I'm going to hand it over to Soumya after just thanking all the three of you and, of course, everybody else who's been here. This has been an incredibly fascinating conversation at many levels, and it's opened up so many threads that I feel we can sort of pick up and talk about. And Charu and Palomi, thank you so much for sharing your points of view, your experiences, and of course, Sandhya, thank you once again for just putting it out so clearly, and I hope this brings some clarity to all of the people who are present here and also the others who are on Facebook. And of course, that you can contact Sandhya if you are looking for more answers to many of your questions. Thank you. Soumya, over to you.
Thanks, Radha. My pleasure again to thank Sandhya. I think that was solid, the inputs that you gave. And I think rooted in the Indian sort of background, I think it's particularly helpful because automatically when thinks of internships, it just gets to the US, Europe sort of situation. So I think that was very valuable. And youngsters, Palomi and Charu, lovely. Thanks very much for participating and sort of, putting up your side of the show. I'd like to thank all our participants, everybody who joined in. And just a reminder, we have, for those of you who have not attended or who have friends who would be interested in this, we have a teenage parenting course in GenWise starting scheduled for 18th Jan. This is by Dr. Bhushan Shukla. Yeah, and the link is up there on chat now. And this has been one of our extremely well-received courses, and parents have been extremely grateful with to Dr. Shukla for the very grounded advice that he gives. I've been on the course many times, and I will heartily recommend it if you have a teen or a preteen and teenager, just looking at teenage coming. So check out our website and spread the word. I think that's it. No, unless somebody else has something that has to be said, I think we can wind up at this point. Thank you, people. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sandhya.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Yeah. If you have a minute, we can debrief after the